Hello and welcome to The Nation. I'm Daniel Rahman. In an interconnected world facing unprecedented challenges, from economic uncertainty to rapidly evolving geopolitical landscapes, global trade and investment has become a driver of prosperity and a potential source of vulnerability. For Malaysia post-COVID-19, deploying the right vision and strategies to increase investment and trade are pivotal to our economic and societal well-being. Done right, they contribute significantly to job creation, technological advancement, and the overall expansion of industries. A key arising question is, how do these strategies and achievements translate into tangible benefits for the people of Malaysia? To enlighten us on this show and more, I welcome to our show today Yang Berhormat Senator Tengku Datuk Seri Zafrul Tengku Abdul Aziz, Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry. YB Minister, welcome to the show. And allow me to get right into the first question. Indonesia, China, Japan, South Korea, these are just a few countries you've been to in recent months to secure investments and trade opportunities. Can you talk us through the numbers and give us an overview of the outcomes of these trade missions?
Right. Well, first of all, thank you, Daniel, for having me. It's good to see you again. We have been rather busy the first couple of months of the year. We've been to, of course, China recently with the Prime Minister, and we've also just came back from Tokyo recently, and Korea, Singapore as well. And I think what's important is that we keep Malaysia in the minds of our investors and update them. Of course, as you know, Malaysia is an important destination for many investors and have been for many years. So we must ensure that we continue this. And for those investors who are already in Malaysia, we would like them to invest more. And for investors who are yet to be in Malaysia, we must sell the story why they should be investing in Malaysia. So the most recent trip, of course, is Japan. We managed to secure, in terms of investments, committed investments, about 23 billion ringgit. And when we go to our trade and investment mission, we also look at trade, and we want to secure exports for our producers, for our exporters, and we've secured 2.3 billion ringgit of exports to Japan. So I think what's important is to keep this momentum. But having said that, what's even more important is when they have committed, we must ensure that is realized. Right?
Yep.
So the work really starts when they come back. When we come back to Malaysia, our agencies, MIDA and Matrade in particular, will have to, really dig and ensure that we execute what have been committed.
With regards to the investments and commitments that we've got throughout the so far, are we on track to achieve the targets that you've set up for your ministry? Could you share with us a little bit about how it's going so far and how you see the rest of the year turning out?
Well, we look at both trade and investment. Let's start with trade. I think global trade is moderating in terms of growth. We will not be witnessing the strong growth that we witnessed in 2022. 2023 is going to be a more challenging year for global trade. In fact, the World Trade Organization have reduced their forecasts for this year. Just to give a comparison for last year. Last year, global trade growth was around 2.7%. This year is forecasted at 1.7%. And we are expecting our trade to be around that region. We are expecting our export to be growing around 1.6% and import to grow by 1.1%. Again, to put things into perspective, last year was in excess of 20%.
Right.
So that's
because of a low base from the year preceding it.
And also because of the global economy is expected to slow down because of various factors. Tightening monetary policy, high inflation. What's happening in Russia and Ukraine, and the geopolitics as well between China and US. But what's key is that our E&E sector will continue to be a key driver in that growth, and we hope that our momentum of trade will be sustained this year and not pose negative growth. So we are still optimistic based on our forecast there will be a positive growth for trade for Malaysia. Investment is tougher, right? Because they are long-term in nature. People do take a longer-term horizon. They don't, rather than what's happening in immediate term, but they're looking at what they think will happen in the long term. So it is important that we have the right ecosystem and the right framework already in place and going to be in place to ensure investment is coming in. And we are positive about this, and we can see from the first quarter numbers. Of course, since the new government came in November, things are a bit more stable compared to previously in the eyes of the investors. This is important, stability. And the first quarter growth versus the first quarter growth of last year has grown by 40%.
40%?
40%. And in terms of total value of investments, both FDI and DDI is at about 71 billion ringgit for the first quarter this year compared to last year. And that growth was 40%. And what's important, it is both FDI and DDI is about 50% each, roughly. Yeah.
So it's about equal in terms of the kind of investment and trade that we see. Malaysia achieved very impressive economic growth, 5.6% in the first quarter of 2023. How do you see trade and investment contribute to this?
Well, trade and investment is a key engine to that number. I think obviously, the calculation of GDP, C plus I plus G plus X minus M, which is consumption, growth, government spending, investment, trade. So trade and investments are the two of the variable in the calculation of a GDP. So we are looking at this year growth based on the forecast by Bernama and MOHE is about 4 to 5%. Of course, compared to last year, it's slower, but where it is definitely much stronger than our peers. In first quarter, as you correctly stated, is around 5.6%. Right, last year was 8.9%, and what we've posted the first quarter was even stronger than other countries in the region. So as long as we keep this momentum going, I think we should be able to achieve the 5.6% growth. We see where inflation is, for example, and we see unemployment rate. Inflation now is at 3.3%, unemployment rate at 3.5%. I think we have the right fundamentals to ensure that the growth is sustained. Of course, there will be challenges, as you know. We are an open economy. Our trade to GDP is in excess of 140%. Therefore, what happens in the world will still have an impact to Malaysia.
And of course, you've often mentioned that we are a global trading nation, and hence everything that happens around us. Now, looking at it from a global perspective, we do see a lot of these upsides that are currently happening, and also since you've taken over the helm at the ministry. But I want to ground this discussion for a moment, if I may. Alongside these trade missions, your ministry has recently secured exciting investments. The Tesla announcement, AWS, there's the Porsche plant in Kedah, Microsoft's data center. But the big question is this: how do these ongoing efforts translate into jobs and economic prosperity for the rakyat? And maybe if you could start with jobs and wages.
Yes. It's very important to understand the spillover impact of investors coming in and spillover effect of the domestic investors as well, and what we want is to ensure that spillover impact is a positive one. And to ensure that the spillover effect is a positive one, we need to ensure that the industry that comes in are industries that give value add, the industries that employ people at a certain skill sets, which will then increase wages, Because as you correctly stated, we want to increase the household income of our nation. We want to, get out of the middle trap income. Looking at where our GNI per capita has been, it's been like the same for the last 10 years.
That's right.
So we need to ensure, first of all, that we focus on sectors that will bring good, high-quality jobs, which will bring good, high wages. And what are those sectors?
So what are those sectors?
In our new industrial plan, under our new investment aspiration, NIA and then the NIP, we have 5 sectors, We're on petrochemical and chemical sectors, the aerospace sector, the healthcare, pharmaceutical sector, the digital economy sector, and also the E&E sector. So these are the 5 sectors that we are focusing on that will should bring that kind of positive spillover effect that will hopefully increase wages, but also the spillover effect to the SMEs. Because the SMEs that are, the whole cluster, the whole ecosystem that will be able to support the Malaysian existing ecosystem that will support the industries that are coming in today.
That's really nice to know in these 5 sectors. The government in the past has targeted through various job generation programs, numbers like 600,000 and such. So the question is, do you have certain numbers of where you project these investments and trade missions creating jobs on the ground?
You see, when Yang Berhormat Perdana Menteri, our Prime Minister, chairs the first National Investment Council, Majlis Pelaburan Negara, we also recognize the fact that it is not enough to report the number of investment coming in terms of absolute terms, they're committed and realized. What's important is what jobs are created, not just how many jobs, what kind of jobs are created.
Yep, that's right.
Right, and how many SMEs are benefiting from it. So we have a task force now. Well, also the National Investment Council, NIC also have made a statement. Which of course is set by the Prime Minister, that MIDA will then be the major or the main investment agency, the investment promotion agency to monitor this.
Right.
So to date, I don't have the number off my head, but it is something that we need to focus on, right? But so we are starting to report. If you look at the statements that we've made, we're starting to report a number of jobs being created every time there is an investment coming in. We also want to go even more detail in how many companies in Malaysia are benefiting from the investments that are coming in as well.
Thanks, Minister, for that. On that point, I recently had a chat with the Penang Skills Development Centre, and they said that their big challenge isn't so much about just the industries, because the industries are there, E&E as you mentioned, but the challenge is actually to find talent. And it's quite paradoxical, because we also saw news that 80% of SPN leavers are not interested in pursuing or furthering their education. Of course, MOE, higher education have talked about various initiatives to address this. From your perspective, what is MITI's perspective on the need, on the talent needs that need to be filled, and what needs to be done?
Yeah. Well, I recently also visited the PSDC, the Penang Skills Development Corporation, and I also went down to Kedah, to Penang, to Johor, and you're right. When I talk to the existing investors, existing companies in nearly all industries, especially in the high technology sector, the tech sector, E&E sector, etc. Their main concern is talent, right? Their talent is being poached by multinationals. Their talent is being poached by overseas, right? And the supply of talent is a concern to them. So you're right. We are producing, but not producing enough. And now with investors, new investors coming in, they are also, the main challenge they said for Malaysia today is to ensure that we have the continuous supply chain of talent, which we used to have more. But now, of course, the base is big, and the growth is expected to be strong. So because we have the right infrastructure, the right incentive, the right energy, they want to create. But so what do we need to do? And that's the thing, and nothing can be done in the short term.
Right. But on that, I mean, some people say that maybe Malaysian youth or job seekers are a little bit choosy or picky, right? I'm sure you've been asked this before. If you could speak directly to a younger Malaysian today, what advice would you give them? Considering you've traveled the world, you've seen these opportunities, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say that even in developed economies, right? Technical vocational education training is important, and working closely with industry, of course, helps to ensure that you have a job, but more importantly, the relevant skills. Sometimes you go to these colleges, and suddenly what the diploma they get is not relevant to what the industry wants. So I think the close collaboration between industries and the higher education, including TVET and higher education, is important. So for me, the advice is, do not think that academic qualification is just about what you learn in universities, because as we know, employers look at university degrees. It's about your discipline, right? Most of us, what we study, we don't really apply directly, right? It's more the discipline, the thought process. Those are the things that are being trained in university, not so much the content. But today, that is becoming, in a country like ours, I think it's important to note that more and more expectation is from young Malaysians to join this field, and we have many opportunities out there, and you must not give that a miss.
Do you see the conversations between your ministry and the MOE or MOHE being effective, kind of platforms that you have right now, especially since you've seen this side of the industry, you see the high-tech jobs being created? Just wanted to ask you a bit about this kind of government sort of collaborative efforts that are happening.
Yes, of course, there's always room for improvement. MIDA have a division within MIDA that also looking at this to ensure that we work closely with TVET, we work closely with the local higher education institutions, and there are successes, there are success stories, right? But I think, like I said, the solution is a long-term solution, where we need to tackle this even at the Ministry of Education level,
right?
Because we need to encourage more and more Malaysian students to go into the STEM subjects, right? Because it'll be too late suddenly at higher education. You want them to, to start being interested in STEM subjects.
Yeah. So while we do talk about long-term solutions, at the core of it is Malaysia's competitiveness, because we've seen our neighbours like Vietnam, Thailand, not just compete with us in some areas that's overtaken us. Often people talk about the education itself, but of course within trade, automotive industry. What are your thoughts then on Malaysia's trade competitiveness and the long-term prospects as a preferred destination for FDI?
Well, we still, I mean, we look at Malaysia. This is, of course, a survey being done by various international institutions. We're still one of the top places for investors to come in. Like I said, we have a stable policy mechanism in place already by especially with a stable government. We have the right infrastructure. Many industries are coming here because they have support in terms of goods and services and people as well. But I think what's also equally important is to ensure that all this continues to be improving year by year, and that's where what you said about productivity is important. So we are seeing that we are more productive than a few other the countries you mentioned, Vietnam, Thailand. Actually, at the absolute number, we are. But in terms of growth, their productive growth is better. So the gap is narrowing, and the danger is, as the gap narrows, it can also, be better.
That's right.
And if the trajectory continues, that will be the case. So we need to realize that, of course, Malaysia Productivity Council is also under MITI. So we are trying to push that envelope. We must, that's why we are focusing on sectors, the right skill set, but also ensuring that our companies as well embrace technology, the 4IR, right? Automation, from manual to going to the 4R technology. That's all important because we have to also stop relying on, cheap labor, for example, right?
We just need to go up. We can't be rely on labor.
Correct.
Minister, if you don't mind, I'd like to move on to another quick point about investments. Because you said earlier that global growth is moderating, and it will undoubtedly affect trade and investments.
We'll trade more than investment.
Trade more than investments. So I like that. I like that. Okay, see what you did there. What do you think are the areas, especially in sustainability, green, that you see Malaysia needs to take advantage of that's emerging?
Yes. This is a very important topic, and it's a topic that I'm, very passionate about as well. And in MITI we are pushing for the industry ESG framework that's hopefully will be complete by end of the year, and we should be announcing in the first quarter of next year. Because you can see even in Europe, in US, there are, if you want market access, you need to comply with certain ESG standards. In EU they've come up with CBAM, the cross-border adjustment mechanism. And of course recently they're talking about other things.
I was going to ask whether you can comment on that. Maybe.
I can comment on that. But of course it's not under my purview directly, but it's part of trade as well. And we are seeing that the companies need to be ready. Even consumers are demanding. I mean, if you go to a restaurant, they give you a plastic straw, you'll say I don't want a plastic straw. Right? I mean, these are the changes in consumer
habits,
and it's moving fast, right? No plastic, no that. But similarly, for when companies have to start embracing it, and many companies that are coming to Malaysia, one of the reasons is because we have renewable energy that we can offer that at a reasonable price, and more important than not, is much more efficient than the brown energy anyway.
On the green energy industry, very quickly, if you could share some thoughts on what is Malaysia's potential in contributing or creating that market for the world. I know different ministries are involved in this, but what are you looking at specifically from your perspective?
Yeah, of course, we're looking more at the downstream, right? For the energy sector, and in most recent visit we were in Korea, in Japan. We're talking about on how to meet the net zero target by 2050 around the world. Of course, many of the countries have similar targets. So we're talking about CCS, carbon storage, carbon utilization and storage. So things like that, where we also have competitive advantage. Recently I was at the Majlis Sains Negara, where chaired by PM, was to look at alternative energy, fuel cells, for example, hydrogen.
Hydrogen, yeah.
Right, that's one. I mean, of course, hydrogen is 4 times more expensive than fuel today, but in the future, right? I mean, we still have to plan. We have by 2050.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that we continue to this and to focus on this. And of course, our ministry and the government also focusing on alternative energy for cars, EV. You mentioned maybe we were behind in ICE, Thailand, etc. But now we have a chance because the EV sector, electric vehicle sector, needs a lot of chips, semiconductor, and Malaysia.
That's us.
That's us. I mean, if you look at the EAE sector, it contributes around 6% to our GDP, right? And we have the market share of the world for nearly 7%. And if you look at the market share of tests and assembly for semiconductor, it's around 13% of our global market share. So we have a competitive advantage which we started much earlier in the 1970s. So we've been 50 years in this space. So this is where I think we need to capitalize on this, leverage on where we are today, and be opportunistic about it, knowing there is a realignment of supply chain happening around the world.
Brilliant. When you share this, there's the numbers are there. You're very clear about about what's happening, the data. You sound like a man with a plan, right? If you don't mind me asking, so on the back of stronger GDP growth, positive investment missions, increased trade, I need to ask you a little bit about politics.
Yeah, sure. I'm ready in my political outfit.
Yeah, that's right. Political outfit like that. Okay, look, everyone has asked you about whether you'll be contesting, and we know that you've mentioned to them that you leave it to the party leadership. I want to ask a slightly different, more nuanced question, which is, what approach do you personally want to take to instill confidence, whether it's party leadership, party members, or members of the public generally?
Yeah, I think it's important that we take note about the concerns of the people, right? Be it the young, the old, new voters especially, because they make up a big chunk of it today, as you've seen under Undi 18.
Yeah, that's right.
And for me and for my party, what we stand for is to ensure that we continue to give the kind of support that people require. And that's in my role as the MITI Minister. I think it's important to drive economic growth because at the end of the day, economic growth will bring prosperity. And we need to, cut, for me, my view, is to ensure that we reduce politicizing things and focus on the issues at hand. Be open-minded about it. Have a mindset shift that, let's try and look ahead to resolve things quickly because, as what you correctly stated, we do not want to be left behind. We need to ensure that our productivity growth is on a different trajectory, right? So that we can continue to be a leader in many industries that we've already had a lead start.
Yeah. But if you don't mind, I think the question was more towards the personal approach, because you were from corporate, now in politics, and therefore there's the Tengku Zafrul brand in that regard, trying to change things up a little bit. So what are your thoughts then on the approach that you are taking to show to the voters this is what's different, in times to come? Yeah.
For me, what's important, and I've started this also in when I was in my previous life as a CEO of a bank, and when I joined MOHE, and of course I think you witnessed it as well, is to ensure that whatever we do, there must be accountability. To have accountability, you need to be transparent about it, and to be transparent about it, you need to ensure that you be transparent about the execution, right? Because at the end of the day, Malaysians are very good at coming out with a plan, a roadmap, blueprint, everything. But less so when it comes to execution. And because of that, there is less accountability, right? Because we are not transparent about our execution. So to me, I think what's important, similarly to when I'm in this ministry, monitoring the investments is going to be very key. Hand-holding a lot of investors all the way, because the hand-hold will take around 2 years, right? To build a factory, to get the approval all the way to local councils, the recruitment, the various approvals from Tenaga to telecom, everything. It requires to ensure that execution is done well, because I think when you are transparent, you become more accountable, but you are also able to see where are the areas that you can improve on and be open about it.
Right. So I like that. So your brand is about transparency, accountability, execution. I promise you last question on this point. With all these efforts, what do you think the Madani government, the unity government, can do more of to communicate this message to the rest? Because sometimes from where I'm sitting, listening to my friends, it seems like it's a bit lost in translation.
Well, it'll take time for people to digest the concept, but I think more and more people now understand. To me, how I read into it, of course, I'm biased because I'm part of government, but it has to be, when you talk about growth, we talk about economic prosperity, and you talk about increase in wealth and etc. It has to be inclusive, right? I think Madani is about respecting people, about understanding the people's views, everything else. But I think everything has to be done in an inclusive manner, right? So I think because we don't want to, everyone has to be treated equally.
Right. Thank you. That's good. That's really nice. I'll just like to end. We've got 30 seconds left.
30 seconds. 30
seconds left. And I want to come back to investments.
Yes.
What are some of the upcoming investments that especially excite you? Can you give us a sneak preview?
Well, there are many, and I've been told by my team I can't reveal it on record and off record. But what's important is that I think the digital economy is a space to watch out for. Of course, digital economy is important, is an enabler for all industries, and Malaysia, I think, can be a major player in this space.
Right. Thank you very much, Yang Berhormat Minister.
Thank you.
And that's all the time we have for you today. Thanks so much for joining us. We had a wide-ranging discussion from trade, investment, job creation, wages, and of course a little bit about Malaysia's democracy, politics, and where we're heading from here. That's all from me. Today on Bernama, we've been discussing why making MITI matter for Malaysians. I'd like to again thank Yang Berhormat Senator Tengku Datuk Sri Zafrul Abdul Aziz, our Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry, for being with us today. Till next time, take care.